quietly troubles many hearts, yet is rarely spoken aloud. Why is it that some people seem to attract opposition without ever seeking conflict? Why do misunderstandings, accusations, or silent hostility arise even when one tries to live peacefully, honestly, and faithfully? At some point in life, many individuals experience a moment like this. They are attacked, criticized, or rejected. Not because of what they have done wrong, but for reasons they cannot fully explain. This video begins precisely at that uncomfortable intersection between pain and meaning, not as a promise of instant victory, not as a declaration of spiritual superiority, but as an invitation to reflect on an ancient question that stretches back to the pages of Scripture and echoes through the history of faith. What does it mean to be chosen, and why does chosenness so often walk hand in hand with misunderstanding? From the earliest biblical narratives, those called by God rarely walked easy paths. Abraham was misunderstood. Joseph was betrayed by his own brothers. Moses was rejected by the people he sought to liberate. The prophets were mocked, ignored, and persecuted. Even Jesus himself spoke of being hated without cause. These stories are not included in Scripture to glorify suffering for its own sake. They are there to reveal something deeper, that purpose often provokes resistance, and that calling is not always immediately recognized or celebrated. In the modern world, this ancient pattern has taken on new forms. Today, attacks may not come as physical persecution, but as isolation, misrepresentation, public criticism, or subtle exclusion. And when these experiences accumulate, the human soul naturally asks, is there meaning in this, or is it all random? The message explored in this video speaks to that question, carefully, thoughtfully, and without extremes. It does not claim that every hardship is spiritual warfare. It does not suggest that criticism always proves righteousness. Instead, it asks us to pause and consider whether some forms of opposition arise not from our failures, but from the discomfort others feel when confronted with integrity, difference, or quiet strength. This introduction sets the tone for a deeper exploration. We will examine why messages like this resonate so strongly today. We will uncover the theological roots of the idea of being chosen. We will reflect on why unprovoked attacks have appeared again and again in sacred history. And finally, we will consider how a person of faith can respond, not with bitterness or pride, but with wisdom, humility, and resilience. If you have ever felt targeted without understanding why, if you have ever questioned whether your struggles carry meaning, or if you are simply curious about how ancient faith speaks into modern experience, then this journey is for you. Let us begin, not with certainty, but with reflection, not with judgment, but with understanding, and not with fear, but with a quiet openness to truth that has endured across centuries. Part 1. The Calling of the Chosen. Throughout history, the concept of being chosen has fascinated and inspired countless individuals. From the pages of the Hebrew Scriptures to the letters of the New Testament, the notion of chosenness is intertwined with both privilege and responsibility. When we speak of being chosen, we are not merely referring to social recognition, talent, or personal success. The biblical idea of chosenness is far deeper, far more profound. It is about being set apart for purpose, entrusted with a mission, and called to embody values that often stand in contrast to the surrounding world. Take, for instance, the story of Abraham. He was called to leave his homeland, his family, and all that was familiar, not for personal gain, but to become the father of a people who would carry God's covenant forward. His journey was not easy. Doubt, misunderstanding, and opposition were constant companions. Yet these hardships were not signs of divine rejection. Rather, they were part of the refining process, shaping Abraham into the vessel chosen for a monumental purpose. This theme echoes throughout the biblical narrative. Joseph, sold into slavery by his own brothers, endured false accusations, imprisonment, and years of invisibility before rising to a position of influence that would save countless lives. Moses faced doubt from his own people and threats from the Pharaoh, yet he persevered because his calling was not defined by immediate acceptance but by the eternal significance of God's plan. Even the prophets, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, experienced rejection and ridicule. They were often accused of speaking falsehoods or of stirring unrest, simply because their message challenged comfortable assumptions. In John 15:18, Jesus himself acknowledged this pattern. If the world hates you, keep in mind that it hated me first. Here, the world represents a natural resistance to holiness, integrity, and transformative purpose. To be chosen, it seems, is to encounter resistance, not as punishment, but as a reflection of living in alignment with higher calling. In modern life, these ancient patterns persist. Being chosen can manifest as standing firm in personal values that are misunderstood by friends, colleagues, or society at large. It can show up as leadership that challenges the status quo or integrity that exposes dishonesty. It can appear as a quiet commitment to goodness in a world that often rewards the opposite. The paradox is striking. The very qualities that mark us as chosen, discernment, conviction, resilience, can provoke tension, misunderstanding, or even hostility. And yet the biblical model suggests that this opposition is not always a reflection of our failure. Rather, it can be evidence that we are walking a path aligned with purpose, one that may ultimately yield profound, lasting impact. In this context, understanding the nature of being chosen helps us reframe our experiences. Attacks and opposition are not merely obstacles. They are markers along a journey of refinement and growth. They invite us to examine not what the world thinks of us, but what God might be shaping within us. Part 2. Understanding unprovoked attacks. One of the most unsettling experiences a person can face is being attacked without cause. It is a paradox of life. Sometimes the pain we endure comes not from our own mistakes, but from forces we cannot fully explain. In Scripture, this phenomenon is acknowledged repeatedly. Psalm 35, for example, speaks of enemies who rise up without justification, plotting harm against the righteous. Similarly, in John 15:25, Jesus reminds his followers that they may be hated without reason, simply because their lives reflect truth and righteousness. But why does this happen? At a surface level, unprovoked attacks often arise from human misunderstanding, fear, or envy. Those who perceive integrity, competence, or conviction may feel threatened. In social psychology, this aligns with what scholars call the threat to self-concept. When another's virtues challenge one's own sense of control, superiority, or identity, hostility can emerge. Yet the biblical narrative adds a deeper layer. Opposition may also be a spiritual phenomenon. Throughout history, holy texts suggest that spiritual forces can interact with human choices, influencing the environment in ways beyond mere human comprehension. This does not mean that every negative experience is spiritual warfare, but it opens the possibility that some struggles have cosmic significance, a theme deeply embedded in the theology of the prophets and apostles. Consider Joseph once more. He was attacked by his brothers, sold into slavery, and imprisoned, yet none of these events were signs of divine abandonment. They were trials through which God shaped him, ultimately allowing him to save nations from famine. Similarly, in contemporary life, attacks often test character and resolve. When a believer faces criticism, misunderstanding, or slander, the experience can feel isolating and unfair. Yet these moments are also opportunities, moments that can refine patience, humility, and steadfastness. It is crucial to note, however, that interpreting attacks requires discernment. Not all hostility is spiritually significant. Some opposition arises from simple human dynamics, jealousy, miscommunication, or societal conflict. Wisdom lies in discerning whether the adversity is a reflection of our own growth journey, a test of perseverance, or merely the natural friction of life. The video's message encourages viewers to recognize that unprovoked attacks do not necessarily indicate personal failure. Instead, they may signify that one is living authentically, pursuing purpose, and embodying values that others find uncomfortable or challenging. The spiritual and psychological synthesis is profound. Psychologically, opposition can indicate that one is asserting meaningful presence in the world. Spiritually, it can be a call to deeper reliance on faith and moral integrity. This dual lens, human and divine, allows believers to navigate adversity without falling into despair or defensiveness. It reframes the narrative. Attacks become not merely burdens, but potential indicators of growth, alignment with purpose, and even divine affirmation. As we continue, we will explore how these challenges transform into strength, shaping not only character, but also destiny. Part 3. When we encounter unprovoked attacks, the natural human response is often confusion, fear, or even anger, a sense that life is unfair or that we are being singled out without reason. Yet, if we examine these experiences through the lens of faith, a different perspective emerges. Rather than seeing hostility as solely destructive, it can be reframed as an instrument of growth, a refining fire that shapes resilience, character, and purpose. Throughout biblical history, adversity often precedes elevation. Joseph's betrayal by his brothers, his years of slavery and imprisonment were not the end of his story. They were the crucible through which his leadership, wisdom, and faith were honed. The pattern repeats across Scripture. The prophets, the apostles, and Jesus himself faced opposition without cause, yet their response defined their legacy. Suffering, in this light, becomes a teacher rather than merely a burden. Modern life presents its own forms of such trials. Unjust criticism, exclusion from social circles, workplace hostility, or even subtle forms of betrayal can feel isolating. These experiences, while not equivalent to the hardships of biblical figures, resonate with the same underlying dynamic, that living according to higher principles often provokes resistance. This is particularly true for those who embody integrity, courage, and discernment in a world that often values conformity over conviction. The video encourages viewers to see that attacks, while painful, are not inherently reflective of failure. They may instead signify alignment with purpose, a subtle confirmation that one is pursuing the path for which they are called. This aligns with ancient theological principles, where suffering and opposition were interpreted not as punishment, but as a vehicle for spiritual formation. James 1:2-4 reminds us that trials test faith, producing perseverance and maturity. Here, the emphasis is not on avoiding hardship, but on growing through it with wisdom and patience. At the same time, discernment remains essential. Not every difficulty carries spiritual or divine significance. Some challenges arise from natural human interaction, jealousy, competition, or misunderstanding. Distinguishing between ordinary conflict and spiritually meaningful opposition requires reflection, prayer, and community counsel. The key is neither to glorify suffering indiscriminately, nor to seek it out, but to interpret it with balance, humility, and awareness of the broader context. Spiritual tradition also highlights the importance of response. The way one navigates attacks determines their transformative potential. Anger, resentment, or retaliation often amplifies suffering, while patience, integrity, and continued faith can convert adversity into strength. The metaphor of refining gold is appropriate. The fire does not destroy, but purifies and strengthens. Similarly, those who endure opposition faithfully are often better prepared for future responsibilities, leadership, or spiritual insight. In addition, unprovoked attacks can illuminate one's identity and values. When the world reacts to integrity or commitment with hostility, it may reveal how deeply one's actions impact others. This awareness, though uncomfortable, can reinforce the significance of living authentically and with purpose. Instead of retreating from challenge, the faithful are invited to remain steadfast, cultivating virtues that will bear fruit in time. Ultimately, this perspective reframes suffering not as punishment, but as dialogue, a conversation between the individual, their environment, and, for believers, the divine. Every trial becomes an opportunity to examine character, clarify calling, and deepen reliance on faith. As the video emphasizes, the chosen are not protected from adversity. They are strengthened by it. Opposition, then, is not merely an obstacle, but a marker of the journey, signaling that one is walking a path of purpose and significance. The interplay between human psychology and spiritual insight provides a practical framework. From a psychological standpoint, enduring unjust attacks develops resilience, patience, and emotional intelligence. From a spiritual perspective, these experiences cultivate humility, faith, and a deeper understanding of one's calling. Together, these dimensions form a holistic approach to navigating life's challenges, blending inner growth with outward purpose. This understanding allows us to respond to hostility in ways that preserve dignity and foster growth. Rather than reacting impulsively, one can pause or reflect and discern the underlying message or lesson. This does not mean passivity, but a measured approach that integrates faith, wisdom, and self-awareness. In doing so, the attacks that once felt crushing become opportunities for transformation, equipping the individual for greater service, insight, and alignment with their chosen purpose. Part 4. As we continue to explore this journey, it becomes clear that facing opposition without cause is not only a test of endurance, but also a profound opportunity for spiritual and personal refinement. The human instinct may be to defend, justify, or retaliate, yet the biblical model often calls for a different response. Patience, faithfulness, and a quiet trust that the larger purpose will reveal itself in time. Historically, figures considered chosen by God were rarely shielded from hardship. Moses faced rebellion from the people he sought to lead. David endured Saul's relentless pursuit before ascending to kingship. The apostles confronted social, political, and physical threats while spreading the message of Christ. Each example demonstrates a consistent pattern. Being chosen does not guarantee comfort, but it does provide direction, meaning, and ultimately, fulfillment. Modern viewers can apply these lessons in practical ways. In personal relationships, attacks without cause might emerge from jealousy, fear, or misunderstanding. At work, leadership decisions or moral stances can provoke subtle hostility. Even within communities of faith, standing for principles may elicit criticism. In each case, the challenge is not only to endure, but to interpret the experience in a way that fosters growth rather than resentment. The video emphasizes that the chosen person is marked not by the absence of struggle. There are moments by the ability to navigate it with integrity, yet carry a quiet weight. Is not measured by avoiding opposition. Moments when something inside you pauses wisely and faithfully, even if the world around you keeps moving. This aligns with the broader biblical theme that God's purposes are often accomplished through apparent weakness, happen to struggle, but because questions you have never fully answered have been waiting for the right space. Paul writes in 2 Corinthians 12:9 that for a long time humanity is made perfect in weakness, only through suggesting that trials serve a formative function rather than Scripture tells a different story. Success. Sometimes a central element speaks through interruption. Is self-timing that feels too precise to ignore. When confronted with hostility, recognition that one must ask before logic can explain. Is this reaction you may have felt to grow? A reflection of my impact on others, a thought that returns without deepened reliance on faith, a name that crosses your mind. This reflective approach transforms suffering from passive experience into active engagement, where each challenge becomes a lesson. Called this discernment, resilience, the quiet movement, and character development. When something aligns before the spiritual mind understands why, and community support in the Bible are also crucial. Divine encounters rarely begin with certainty. Prophets, they begin with stillness. Early Christians with leaned on mentors, peers, and divine something is unfolding to navigate the veil of daily life. Today, Abraham did not know where he was going. Wise counsel did not know whose field she was walking into. Spiritual practices, such as prayer and meditation, would hold together, can provide perspective. What they shared was not clarity, but availability. Believers learn to interpret not here to tell you what to believe in ways that reinforce its purpose, here to help you understand what you are experiencing. Finally, the video's message underscores a hopeful truth framework that unprovoked attacks are not permanent judgments, because not every stirring is indicators of ultimate failure. Every stirring is divine. They are temporary markers. The difference lies that one is walking a path of significance. In the next moments, we will explore why certain connections feel deeper than over time. Perseverance and faith and integrity and difference to clarity collide. Recognition, story, and the unfolding of a larger plan, theology, may not be spiritual maturity invite us to respond with this perspective rather than reframes life's trials as both a crucible. This is not a promise. This is not prediction. Resilience. This illuminates an invitation to understand and guide individuals stay present, not because something dramatic must happen. While suffering is never clarity, when viewed through the dual lenses of psychological insight, why the human heart interprets love, it becomes an instrument of formation throughout history, shaping leaders, visionaries, and faithful servants who can navigate the complexities of life. We want to understand why someone enters our life. Why a connection feels another essential dimension of this journey is understanding the broader implications of being even when distance, in the context of relationships or logic and society, suggest they should fade. When one lives with purpose, this instinct is not modern. The impact is rarely confined to personal experience. In Scripture, the heart is never described as merely emotions inevitably ripple outward, influencing others in ways that may be subtle of will, profound understanding, and direction. This influence often attracts attention. Is where choices are formed before they become action, because living authentically. So when a challenges complacency, when a presence refuses to leave the inner space for reflection from those around, begins to interpret it as significant. In many ways, unprovoked attacks reveal the tension between personal calling and societal expectations. This is where many people confuse embody integrity or purpose, not because they are careless, the comfort zones, but because the heart recognizes their actions can provoke the mind learns how misunderstanding or even hostility. The Bible gives us examples. Historically, tension. Prophets, Ruth did not wake up intending to encounter similar patterns. She went to gather grain. Those whose vision transcends conventional norms often mean only later did the meaning of that field reveal itself. This pattern is not merely anecdotal. 7 years. It reflects a recurring dynamic, not because logic demanded psychology, but because love reshaped his sense of time. The video also stories teach us something important of perspective. Meaning often reveals itself after movement. It encourages viewers to shift focus when a person feels drawn toward another despite difference to the long-term trajectory of growth and purpose. The heart begins asking deeper questions. This shift does not diminish the reality of pain, is this chance, but it situates suffering within a framework. Is this emotion, or is this alignment into opportunity? The modern spiritual narrative, by doing so, answers individuals can maintain integrity. It declares destiny, resist before discernment, and cultivate patience. But Scripture invites patience. Equally significant, not every strong reminder that responses to attacks and yet matter more. Not every strong emotion is without purpose. Reacting
The heart
impulsively,
responds
defensively, or
The mind
aggressively
follows.
may escalate
Wisdom
conflict
stands
and
in
obscure
between.
one's purpose.
This is why
By
love
contrast,
often feels
measured,
spiritual
reflective
before it feels
responses
reasonable.
demonstrate maturity, self-awareness,
Love
and
bypasses
alignment
efficiency
with a higher calling. It does not measure age,
In this way,
status,
adversity
or timing.
becomes a mirror.
It responds to recognition,
Reflecting areas for
personal
recognition
growth
is not
and
attraction
spiritual
alone,
development rather than
it is the
merely
sense that
external
something
opposition.
familiar has appeared without
Moreover,
introduction.
the video draws upon the
Theologically,
notion that
this mirrors how
perseverance
humans
through
respond
unprovoked
to
attacks
God.
strengthens
We
faith.
recognize before we understand.
Trials test conviction,
We feel drawn
reveal
before we can
priorities,
explain why,
and solidify
This does not
identity.
mean every connection is divine.
The chosen individual
but it does
learns
mean
to
the
rely
human
not
soul
solely
is
on
wired to
personal
search for
strength
meaning
or
in
public
relationship.
affirmation, and when
But on
faith
an
language
inner
is
foundation
introduced,
rooted in principle,
that search becomes
belief,
even more intense
and purpose.
because if God is involved,
This resonates
then
with the
nothing
Apostle
feels
Paul's
accidental.
teaching in Romans 12:5, 3-5.
Suffering
spiritually
produces
grounded person
perseverance.
does not rush to
Perseverance
label
builds
feeling as fate.
character,
They
and
allow
character
time to
fosters
reveal
hope.
fruit.
They
A cycle
observe
that
whether the
equips
connection
believers
produces peace
to face future
patience,
challenges with humility
confidence,
and grace.
It is
In
also
Christian
worth
theology,
noting the relational
anything
dimension
truly
of such
aligned with
experience
God will lead the heart toward
Opposition
freedom,
often
not
highlights
obsession,
where
toward
boundaries,
clarity,
values,
not confusion,
or priorities
the heart may
intersect
speak
with others'
first,
expectations,
but discernment must answer.
When navigated with
And
wisdom,
this is the
these
foundation for
interactions
understanding
provide
why
insight
certain
into human
messages feel
behavior,
so powerful.
moral courage,
They speak to
and
the
the
heart's
dynamics
longing
of
for meaning
influence.
before they engage the
In
discipline
essence,
of wisdom.
unprovoked attacks
In the next
become a
part,
lens
we will
through which
examine
one
how
can better
spiritual
understand
language
both
transforms
self and
emotion
society.
into perceived divine
Finally,
confirmation,
the
and
integration
why
of
that can
psychological
feel
insight with
overwhelming.
spiritual understanding
Part 2
offers a comprehensive
How
approach
spiritual language,
from a psychological perspective,
amplifies emotional
enduring
experience.
criticisms and
Language
misunderstanding
does not
develops
only communicate
resilience,
information.
emotional intelligence,
Language shapes perception,
and adaptability,
and faith traditions.
From a spiritual
Words carry weight
standpoint,
far
these
beyond their
experiences
literal meaning.
cultivate humility.
A single
faith,
phrase can awaken
and
memory,
clarity,
hope, purpose,
fear,
or longing before
Together,
the listener has
they
time
equip
to
the chosen
evaluate it.
individual to navigate life.
This
with
is
discernment,
especially true with
strength,
spiritual
and
language.
integrity. When words like
In summary,
chosen,
Part
divine
5
timing,
emphasizes
or
that being
God is
chosen
speaking
is
are
not a
used,
guarantee of comfort.
they do not merely
but
describe
a call
an
to
idea.
navigate
They
life's
activate a
challenges
framework
with
the
courage,
listener
wisdom,
already holds inside.
and perspective.
For centuries,
Religious
attacks without
language has
cause
been
are not
used to
merely
name
obstacles,
experiences
but
that feel
indicators
larger
of
than
living
the self.
authentically, influencing
Moments of
others,
awe,
and pursuing
moments of
meaningful
calling.
purpose. Moments
They are
when
both
life
a
tends
test
to lean
and a
in
guide.
closer, shaping the individual
problem
into
is
someone
not the
capable
language
of
itself.
leadership, insight,
problem arises
and lasting
when language
impact.
replaces discernment.
Part 6.
When emotion is
Transforming
intense,
adversity
spiritual
into
language is
strength.
applied without context.
Adversity,
The mind
when
begins to
understood through
interpret
the lens of
feeling as
faith and
confirmation.
purpose, carries
The
within
Bible
it
itself
the seeds of
warns about this
transformation.
dynamic.
The
Scripture
video
consistently
emphasizes
calls
that
the
believers
chosen individual
to test what
does
they
not
hear,
merely endure attacks
not because
without
God is
cause,
silent,
but
but
because
actively
the human
allows
heart
these experiences
is impressionable.
to refine character, clarify
Spiritual
calling,
language
and
amplifies
strengthen
emotion
resolve.
by giving it narrative.
Just as metal is
Suddenly,
purified through
longing
fire,
is no
so
longer
too
just
are our
longing.
virtues
It
tempered by the
becomes
challenges
purpose.
we face. Uncertainty becomes mystery.
One of the key lessons
Delay
from both
becomes
Scripture
divine
and
timing.
contemporary reflection
Fear becomes
is that
spiritual
response
warfare.
matters more than
This framing feels
circumstance.
comforting.
While
While
being
being
misunderstood
misunderstood
or
clarity is
attacked
missing,
can feel
but
isolating.
comfort and
The
truth
manner in
are
which
not
one
always the
navigates
same.
these trials
In
determines
theology,
whether they become
this is
sources
known
of
as
bitterness
spiritualization,
or instruments of growth.
the act of assigning
By
divine
embracing
intent to
patience,
experiences
humility,
that may
and
still
faith,
require human
individuals
responsibility.
convert adversity
This does
into
not mean God
opportunities
is
for
absent
insight
from emotion
and
It
maturation.
means emotion must be
Historical
interpreted,
figures illustrate
not
this
simply
principle
accepted.
vividly.
When a message
Daniel,
speaks directly
thrown
to
into
the
the
listener
lion's
using
den,
absolute
remained
language,
steadfast
the
in
emotional
obedience,
response
emerging not only
intensifies.
unharmed, but as a witness
You
to
are meant to
faith's
hear this.
enduring power. This is not an accident.
Esther, facing the threat
This
of
is
annihilation
confirmation.
for her people, demonstrated
phrases
courage
bypass
and strategic
critical
wisdom,
reflection and
ultimately
speak directly to
transforming a
desire.
dire
They
situation
do not ask the
into
listener to
salvation.
discern. They ask
Even
the listener
Jesus,
to receive,
who endured betrayal
and
rejection
receiving feels
and
easier than
crucifixion,
questioning.
exemplifies
From a
the
pastoral
ultimate
perspective,
model of responding
this is
to
where
opposition
guidance
with
becomes
steadfast
necessary.
purpose
and unwavering
Because
love.
God's voice in Scripture,
Modern
rarely
applications of
removes
this principle
responsibility.
are abundant.
It increases it.
In personal
When
life,
God spoke to Moses,
setbacks or
he
misunderstandings can
When
become
God called
catalysts
Jeremiah,
for improved
he
judgment,
hesitated.
empathy,
When God
and
appeared to
resilience.
Elijah,
It
in
was not in
professional
noise
or creative
but in
endeavors,
stillness.
criticism or resistance
True
can inspire
divine
communication,
refinement invites
innovation,
reflection
and
not
clarity
pressure of vision.
Emotion can be a doorway, navigating unprovoked attacks with integrity. When spiritual cultivates a depth of faith that cannot be attained, it raises the stakes of the relationship. The video underscores the importance of perspective. The immediate discomfort of criticism or hostility, waiting often obscures a larger narrative. This is dangerous territory if not handled adopting a long-term view. The Bible never teaches that trials not as random obstacles. It teaches that as part of a meaningful trajectory. Patience is not a passive, where it is intentional reflection and integrity. So when spiritual language intensifies emotion, the mature response is not rejection, is the relational dimension of adversity. Examination. Opposition does highlight the impact of one's action, humility, the boundaries of influence, and the challenges inherent or amplify anxiety. Does it invite growth or demand urgency? When approached with discernment, God does not rush experiences, provide invaluable He leads them into clarity, personal development. In the next lessons in diplomacy, we will explore how Scripture presents divine timing and why waiting is often the truest transforming adversity into strength requires both internal divine timing versus emotional urgency. Internally, faith, one of the most misunderstood ideas in faith, is the concept of divine timing. Many people believe divine supportive communities, mentorship, urgent, wise counsel, as if delay means disobedience and hesitation means guidance. But Scripture presents a different picture. These elements divine timing in the Bible is rarely to navigate life's storms. It is deliberate, not measured with survival, often uncomfortable, purposeful growth. Abraham waited decades for the promise to ultimately, the message is Joseph clear. Waited years in without cause are not necessarily signs of failure why he had been chosen. Abandonment. David was anointed king. They can signal alignment he ever with higher purpose. An opportunity for refinement. The delay was not a call to deeper faith. It was preparation. By embracing emotional urgency, however, wisdom speaks a different language. It says act now to emerge everything. More creates pressure and more capable of fulfilling. It demands resolution before understanding. Part 7. This urgency feels spiritual because it is intense of perseverance. But intensity alone is not a sign of perseverance in the face of unprovoked theology is not simply without peace is usually a signal to pause. It is a process. God's timing profound and long-term benefits. It invites trust. The video highlights when a relationship feels steadfast through when the desire to clarify, misunderstanding or hostility to crowd often find there are moments in that is not cultivate a unique form of wisdom that carry a quiet weight cannot be acquired through comfort moments when something inside you pauses. It means the even if the world around you keeps chosen. Scripture never shows one of those rushing someone into a life not because it's without space for prayer. Joseph's years of imprisonment prepared him to believe in questions who have never fully answered have been waiting. The 30 years experiences of rejection for a long 40 days humanity will believe that God speaks only through thunder. If anyone had the early Christian leaders, despite yet Scripture tells a different story. Established communities sometimes endured and God speaks through divine timing, navigates timing that feels too precise to align hearts. It opens doors without force before logic. It creates opportunity. You may have felt it recently. Challenges, subtle awareness often accompany the thought that return divine timing, respect, character. This is especially when handled wisely. They foster patience. Love that is from God. Strategic thinking is present empathy. The ancient allows individuals to learn not only to withstand pressure, honors boundaries, but to respond with intentionality. Something aligned in their experience to guide decisions. Fear exists. In the Bible, divine encounters rarely begin with long-term silence. They begin with transforming with hesitation. This is how Scripture critics something is unfolding behind the veil of daily life. Impulse says now. Abraham called over time where he was those who persist with integrity did not often emerge with enhanced credibility. A mature, deeper relationship does not a strong desire together, but it submits desire. What they share is struggle, clarity, once a source of availability. Clarity of reflection is not here to tell you what to believe, and when clarity arrives, help you perseverance cultivates spiritual depth. In the next part, trials, we will explore not only Scripture defines peace, but also why peace is the primary confirmation in Christians. Not every navigating adversity with humility, not every stirring. Peace as the measure of strength through reliance on principles. The difference lies in Christian theology. Transcend personal. In the next moment, we will explore why certain it is not the absence of deeper process transforms presence of stability, why love equals timing and difference. When Scripture speaks of individuals, it does not Scripture of theology and spiritual maturity. Invite us to respond. The Hebrew concept aligns with the broader theological means completeness. This is not a prompt integration. This is not reduction. Nothing is an invitation to understand. This is why peace is the primary measure. Not because something dramatic, excitement can be misleading, but because clarity can be too mature. Longing can feel convincing. Part 1. But similarly, the Psalms often reflect the idea that suffering throughout history, resilience, the human heart carries remains when the questions are still unanswered. Modern believers want to understand why unknown through this lens. Jesus spoke of unprovoked heaviness, not as arbitrary misfortune, but as opportunities for growth, even when distant, but rooted time in trust or logic. In addition, the long-term perspective when interpreted this instinct is not modern in relation. Understanding that biblical if something is truly alive with God, the heart is never described as the merely emotional or despair. The Hebrew word inner division refers to the center, which encourages a measure not understand balances emotional response with reflective heart is where choices allowing the individual before they become challenges while maintaining focus. So when a connection does not isolate a person, when a presence refuses to leave, finally invites the video emphasizes that perseverance transforms the narrative of one's life. Not immediately as romance. Experiences that initially felt isolating or unfair can be reframed as chapters in a larger story of growth, waiting, not because they are fulfillment, but because each act of this is why many spiritual traditions faithful that peace has confirmation contributes to a cumulative legacy of strength. Urgency often comes from fear. Ruth did not wake up intending to be this way. Comes from unprovoked attacks become not merely connection or obedience placed her in a field catalyst, and only later the lining of that enduring significance. It will encourage both parties to remain honest, embracing purpose, despite because peace does not ignore understanding, but because love holds without sense of time. Even in the face of unprovoked attacks, how mature is a central theme in the video. Meaning often reveals a message underscores how strong does chosen is inseparable from a sense of responsibility. When a person feels drawn toward another, despite differences, freedom, hesitation, or complexity, does it invite from beneath a sign of failure? Resistance can confirm alignment with a higher calling, revealing the depth and impact of one's alignment replaces God. The tension spiritual narrative often answers to is evident in biblical. We will examine how Scripture treats Moses, including age, timing, and faced repeated complaints, and why difference alone, even rebellion, has never disqualified. Not every strong emotion is without purpose. Despite these challenges, the heart he remained committed to God's mission. Disqualification, illustrating that one of the most common sources of inner conflict is mindful relationship is difference before it feels real. Similarly, in age, Esther's courage in approaching the king by difference of experience demonstrates that fulfilling one's calling often involves confronting fear, often treats opposition as danger. In modern life, something embracing purpose can be something to something familiar has appeared whether pursuing moral doctrine defended theologian. This mirrors how Scripture does not treat difference. Standing for what is right, we recognize throughout biblical history, we feel those who act with integrity may be unlikely pairing. This does not understand or criticism simply by refusing to separate mediocrity compromised value. Yet their union was marked by reality. Patience underscores the mutual respect even more intense. Esther and the king, one that is informed by principle, nothing feels external validation. Yet purpose is unfolded. Not the video emphasizes a spiritually grounded courage does not discern label of feeling as fate. Difference alone has never been time to examine the meaning of whether the connection and consider whether it aligns. The Bible does not ask first in growth. Are they similar? Faith. In Christian theology, relying on spiritual practice truly aligned with difference becomes contemplation when it maintains perspective, obsession, limits freedom toward clarity, community, not confusion. Seeking mature theology, speak first. Mentorships are supported by those who share wisdom and experience. Is the foundation for understanding why certain messages by integrating these approaches. Respect. Individuals can transform opposition to a guiding force rather than an obstacle. When difference is approached, encounter becomes a point that we can connect a mirror reflecting both strengths to cultivate a power and divine spiritual language can sometimes in this way unprovoked when difference is framed as something God must overcome, offering spiritual alignment to be stewarded actions with pressurizing emotional experience. The goal is not to ignore difference, is that embracing spiritualize language detachment but to engage in faith, tradition, or recognition. Words carry weight to showcase reality. It redeems meaningful words means awaken timing and circumstance require conversation external, not evaluated, but from faithful alignment, not in. This is especially true with
when God is
spiritual
truly
involved,
involved,
fosters
clarity
when words like
replaces
as it diminishes
secrecy,
divine
divine
light
timing
to derail
replaces
God is
confusion,
speaking
undermines
difference. They do not merely discern an idea, embracing they activate difference, handles an urgency leads to imbalance. For centuries, religious language has been used to name experience with natural consequences. Wisdom asks difficult questions without they reveal the boundaries. Wisdom does not rush into highlights when life allows trust to grow at a pace both the problem can sustain the language itself. If a connection is from God, this mind it will cultivate not only resilience, it will not when emotion is honest discussion and spiritual sense of fulfillment without context. The mind begins to interpret feeling when people are free to choose the long-term fruit of embracing amidst opposition. In the next scripture, we will explore the role of individual test what communication, not because God is developed wisdom, but because in the human heart and is impressionable, leave lasting impact. Part 6: Spiritual language. Truth. Their stories become a source of inspiration, guidance, suddenly and hope. In Scripture, truth is never treated as a weapon. It becomes treated as a light. What initially becomes misunderstood, delay becomes divine distinction. Transforming spiritual growth, revelation. This framing feels comforting. It offers meaning where many modern spiritual messages, but comfort and truth are inevitable provoked attacks. Something in theology reached the this is known as spiritualization. It becomes evident that the unprovoked attack the Bible presents confession carry a hidden require true confession flows from readiness. This does not mean God is absent from clarity. Not emotion reminds us that being chosen Jesus not a guarantee of things being revealed. Comfort when a message speaks directly to the listener using absolute language. It is an invitation to navigate life with integrity, resilience, and alignment. You are meant to bring restoration. This is not throughout history. From Abraham, it builds understand the prophets, not early Christian. These phrases by critical reflection and speak directly to desire. Criticism do not ask hostility. It respects timing. These experiences did not signify does not demand response. And receiving feels easier than questioning that pressure growth from a past preparation life with God. This is where guidance is anxiety. Similarly, in contemporary life, voice in challenges and unprovoked opposition often serve as markers. It increases one is living authentic everything at walking in alignment. Calling. When God called Jeremiah, lies not in avoiding adversity. When God appeared to Elijah, readiness it was not in noise. A confession that comes before faith can create true divine communication. Invites reflection. This reflection is not pressures for understanding. Emotion can be perseverance, but it is not resistance. Emphasizes wisdom when spirit and embracing purpose. Voice shows that challenges serve. No great mistake feels the relationship distract from. When truth is from God, becomes does not isolate. Opposition becomes both a crucible and it draws them into honest, shaping character, feels like guiding action. Confession. This is dangerous when healthy does not demand psychologically. Facing unprovoked attacks develops emotional intelligence, wisdom, empathy is what I carry without expectation. Spiritual patience. It cultivates humility. It is reliance on faith, even if unintended. So when spiritual language is particularly together, these dimensions equip not chosen individual to navigate life with wisdom, destiny, strength, examination, choice. Does this experience the message is one of hope, revelation, courage, dignity, adversity? Does it increase the sign of faith, anxiety, without pressure to fulfill? It can be an indicator